Sepulchres of the dead, graves, tombs, mausoleums, stories of the supernatural, the unexplained, even the truly bizarre, often surround them. I'm Graham Phillips, and these are some of the many such mysteries I've researched. Welcome to Grave Secrets. As many of you know, I have my own theory as to the identity of the historical Arthur and where he was buried. However, this short film concerns the traditional story of King Arthur and his final resting place, the one the tourists know and love. According to legend, Arthur was born on the windswept coast of southwest England, in a building whose ruins still survive, Tintagel Castle in the county of Cornwall. While still a baby, he was taken away by Merlin the magician to be raised in secret, later proving himself king by drawing the sword from the stone. Surprisingly, there are records well over 1,000 years old to reveal that this character from popular medieval romance was based on an historical figure who lived around the year 500 AD. In legend, when Arthur died, he was buried on the Isle of Avalon, the location of which had been forgotten in the centuries following his death. According to some accounts, Avalon was the district of Glastonbury in the county of Somerset, once an island surrounded by marshy land, now famous for its hill or tor, with a medieval tower on its summit and the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey in the valley below. During the Middle Ages, the abbey was spectacular, but it burnt down in 1184. And during reconstruction of the building in 1191, the monks claimed to have discovered the grave of a man buried with a lead cross bearing the Latin inscription, "Here lies interred the famous King Arthur on the Isle of Avalon." The remains were later reinterred in a lavish tomb before the great altar of the new abbey, and pilgrims came from far and wide to pay homage at the shrine of Britain's most famous king. And before long, rumours circulated that the monks had also discovered the body of Queen Guinevere, which is the version of events the custodians of the now ruined abbey still promote today. But is the story true? Was this really King Arthur's grave? Or was it all a hoax initiated by the medieval monks of Glastonbury Abbey? In the 1530s, during the Reformation, when Henry VIII broke from the Roman Church, Catholic monasteries were seized and plundered, and Glastonbury Abbey was sacked and abandoned. The bones purported to be King Arthur's, and the cross said to have proved it, were lost to history. All we have now are illustrations of the cross made at the time. Nothing to forensically examine. In my opinion, the whole affair is somewhat suspicious. There is no written evidence that anyone prior to 1191 considered Glastonbury as the site of Avalon, for instance in the works of England's greatest 12th century historian, William of Malmesbury. who even wrote at length about Glastonbury in the 1130s, where Arthur's final resting place of Avalon was thought to be, had been forgotten during the previous 7 centuries. Yet the cross told the world that Glastonbury was the Isle of Avalon. Here lies the famous King Arthur on the Isle of Avalon, very convenient and dubious. If during Arthur's time Glastonbury had been called Avalon, why put it on the cross? It would be like after my death, were I to be buried in London, having a headstone inscribed with the words, "Here lies Graham Phillips in the town of London." Everyone would know that they were in London. But why fake such a discovery? During the Middle Ages, the bones of saints and sometimes famous kings were known as relics and thought to hold curative and other miraculous properties. Pilgrims would travel miles to be close to such relics in the hope that they might be healed or achieve a higher state of spirituality. Relics were big business, and the bones of the more famous figures would attract the most visitors and, more importantly, greater donations. Many ecclesiastical institutions grew rich on the proceeds, and Glastonbury Abbey was desperately in need of funds for rebuilding following the fire. In fact, the supposed bones of King Arthur attracted so many pilgrims that Glastonbury Abbey was rebuilt as one of the finest in England. But what makes the discovery even more suspicious is that the monks not only claim to have found Arthur's bones, but other illustrious figures, such as St. Dunstan, whose remains had long been, and still are, at Canterbury Cathedral in England's southeast, where he had been Archbishop, and more astonishingly, those of the Irish patron St. Patrick, whose grave was and still is at Down Cathedral in Ireland. So, did the remains of King Arthur, and perhaps also Queen Guinevere, once lie in a tomb before the high altar at Glastonbury Abbey? In 1962, archaeologist Raleigh Radford excavated the area where the monks claimed to have found Arthur's remains. He determined that there did appear to have once been a grave at the site, but nothing was found to date it. Maybe the monks did find a grave after all, perhaps an unmarked grave, and someone had the bright idea to claim the remains they unearthed were those of King Arthur, and the cross fashioned as proof. Or was it a truly honest discovery, as they maintained? After all, they were men of God. Perhaps the tourists who still flock to Glastonbury Abbey really are visiting the site of what was once King Arthur's tomb.